In this episode, we interview Aaron Friedman, co-founder and executive director of Olastio. Olastio stands for Our Lives as Seen Through Each Other, and their mission is to create experiences that empower students to serve as catalysts for social impact. Alrighty, so thanks everybody for tuning into this episode. Today we have Aaron Friedman, who's a co-founder and executive director of Olastio. Aaron, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me, Joseph.
Yeah, of course. So we always start our episodes by hearing what the mission is of the organizations that we're interviewing. So what's the mission of Olastio, and then what does it stand for?
The official mission statement, we were creating the company, is to create experiences that empower students to serve as catalysts for social impact. But, after we started the company, we quickly realized that 99% of nonprofits, and you probably know this more than most, our mission statements sound really cool and they mean a lot to us, but they don't actually make sense to most of the general public. So, we've been kind of refining the mission statement in terms of following that by saying we create culturally enriching, life-changing field trips. We kind of turn the field trip model on its head. We call them excursions. And we take high school students right now from certain areas of LA on trips locally, nationally, and have gone international as well.
All right. And then what does Olastio stand for?
All right. So it is an acronym, and that sometimes it bothers me when it gets spelled like it's somebody's name, because that's not the intention, but we'll get there in time with exposure. But it stands for Our Lives as Seen Through Each Other. So I was looking for an acronym that wasn't easily Googleable, but also a way to nicely say, or maybe in a more fancy way, say, put yourself in someone else's shoes, because our experiences, our excursions are very much around building empathy by understanding cultural identity, history, and where we're going as a society. So yeah, it's a meaningful thing to us for sure.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's a really, really cool name. So why you? Why is this your kind of life during the day now?
Yeah, I mean, well, I always ask, like, why not? I feel like, there's always been I was exposed early by my mother, who is a little bit of a quirky individual, but she exposed me to just the inequities in our society. Growing up, very comfortable in middle class, nuclear family, everything together. I never wanted for anything. But from an early age, my mother showed me that that's not the case for many, many people from all walks of life. Also grew up in a very diverse school district that exposed me to so many different cultures, but also the realities of being, from this culture versus that culture, and this race versus that race, and how that impacts you in society. So, always kept that with me. And my wife has some similar experiences growing up in the Cleveland, Ohio area. And so, we stumbled upon this Holocaust survivor, and I'd grown up around a lot of Holocaust survivors, a Jewish kid from New York, and so started supporting her, and then went on a trip to Auschwitz with her. And when we were on this trip, we just imagined if we, as high school students, or if we took some of the high school students that my wife had been working with in education here in LA, in Watts, and took them on a trip like this. And so that's kind of the origins of it. And that's why I think it's just the paths we've walked in life, the exposure we've gotten in life to things, and the desire to level the equity playing field and kind of expose young minds that don't have those opportunities to these unbelievable walks of life that could be their potential paths, from a young age. So, yeah, I say, why not? And I wish more people would just kind of, go with a passion, not necessarily a for-profit project, but this nonprofit world.
Yeah. You mentioned empathy is one of the things that you hope that the kids that you're serving are experience and build. How do you, since this is like core to what you're teaching, how do you define empathy, and why do you think it's important?
I mean, we really go back to the acronym, right? And putting ourselves in someone else's shoes. I learned a lot from the Holocaust survivor that, was the inspiration for the excursion model. Eva Moses Core, she's, like a grandmother to me. We lost her in July of 2019, actually giving a tour of Auschwitz. No Holocaust survivor has been back there so much. And she preached a message of forgiveness that not everybody agreed with. Forgiveness of the Nazis, forgiveness of Dr. Mengele, who experimented on her and killed her family, that type of thing. But, when we talk about empathy, we're really trying to teach our students of, people's walks in life are not necessarily chosen, by them, chosen for them at times. And, what would you do if you grew up in Nazi Germany as a young German, person, right? How would you respond? And so teaching that history and putting yourself in someone else's shoes, it's like, wow, I can see how this can happen. And so that's really important to understand the warning signs, whether it's in a school environment to prevent a bullying situation, right? Or if these young minds go on to be part of government, right? And they're having to have this empathy to be able to be effective in what they're doing to shape our society. So, yeah, it's pretty simple for us. We also say that we foster diversity because communities we work in happen to be predominantly people of color, low income and underserved communities, unfortunately. But also, fortunately, that we can level the playing field. And the other value we always say is we build community because once we're in there, we are not going to stop. And that's important because, trust is something that you have to earn, especially in communities that have been mistreated over time and have a reason to distrust. So we are in there and we want to build community. And we have a lot of, multi-generational now kind of students, well, at least siblings, right, that have gone through the program for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And one last question before we move to the actual programming and the history of Olastio is you've given examples of some initial trips that you do with the youth of at a global scale. And I'm dividing this in my mind of empathy, like global empathy versus local empathy, because like having the experience of the concentration camps versus having the experience of something local in your community. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the difference between those two, and kind of see where the conversation goes from there.
I mean, that's a great question because I think, Eva was near and dear to me, and I actually went to work for her later on. And, that was an incredibly important person in my life. I think the 4 students who went on those first 2 trips with us will attest that it was a very impactful thing for their lives as well. They're all graduated from college this spring, and we're close with all 4 of them. So, that was really important. But I always was feeling like, one, it's very expensive, and we only get 2 students for like $5,000 at the time, right, to get them over there. And it's something I've always struggled with, growing up and being taught the way I taught, like real American history. We were just focusing too much on a story that was told, like you're saying, over there. And it's an important story, okay? Certainly important for me on a personal level, but we need to start telling the stories here, locally, nationally. And so that's why we made the decision to go to DC. And so it's not the local necessarily, but it's taking these kids from LA, putting them in DC, using the Smithsonian Institution for everything we should be using it for, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, right? These types of things, the Mexican Cultural Institute. So, these are the things that we can go to. But then when we exposed students to the local excursion model, and we rolled that out in late 2021, that was even more to your point, because now we can take them to Little Tokyo, right? We can have lunch in there, see a little bit of Japanese American culture, but then we can go to the biggest and most important, I think, cultural museum for Japanese Americans in the country, the Japanese American National Museum, which is right downtown LA. And they can learn about Japanese Americans who lived in similar areas where these students live now, and were kicked out of these areas and sent to concentration camps in the deserts of Colorado and Arizona and Utah and California. And so it's, you're able to connect those dots, and it's very important. That local excursion model, I think, will wind up, when we get into the future conversation, I'm thinking now, and so is my wife, that's really going to be what exposes us across the country to more and more people.
What do you hope, and what have you seen the students experience emotion-wise going through these programs and going to the Japanese American Museum and any of the other examples you shared?
I mean, it's been amazing because it's like a product, right? If we were a for-profit company, create a product, you're hoping to sell it to consumers, and you're hoping these consumers have the experience of their lives, right? And they remember it forever, whatever it is. It could be a CPG product like a piece of food or beverage, right? It could be a machinery of some kind, but you hope they love it. And we had the same hopes because we love the experience of traveling and being exposed to these cultural things and understandings. But I mean, it was immediate right away. I mean, obviously, the impact of traveling with an 85-year-old Holocaust survivor to Auschwitz with two 15-year-olds that have never been outside of Los Angeles is going to be mind blowing. But the
Yeah.
DC experience, when we exposed students to that, that was incredible. And actually, our student board member, who's now 21 years old, Leilani, she really was struggling when we first met her as a sophomore in Watts with just, kind of like an abusive relationship, low self-esteem, kind of lost. She went on the trip. She said a pretty, you know, in a lot of ways, mentally defeated young person. And when she got off that plane coming back from this 5-day trip, she she broke up with the person she was dating, and she changed her whole life. And she hasn't looked back. She's dealt with some major immigration issues that we've stuck in there and supported her as much as we can. And now she's back and she's doing her thing. And she credits the Olastio experience to kind of turning that around. I think a
Wow.
lot of students, we see them use the experiences in their college admission essays because we're working with other nonprofits with students that are typically geared to be first generation college students or just college students in general. And so they use the experience for their admission essay quite a bit, which is powerful.
Yeah.
And I think when you bond with students and people on now it's a 6-day, 5-night thing. You're together all the time. You're experiencing these wonderful moments together, fun moments together, eating great food, going to these cool little, attractions, tourist attractions, and having the cultural attractions. You bond with those people, and it creates a bond that honestly, I saw from those trips to Auschwitz with Eva. It never goes away. And that's definitely resonated because these kids come back to Ceci and I and to our board members and to some of our donors they've created relationships with. And, we're in their lives. Last night, I was on the way to this dinner that I was doing for my professional work. And one of our students who never even went on a trip with us, just a virtual experience, my guy, Matt, we've been working together to try to get him this first gen internship with the Emerson Collective. Uh, and he got one yesterday. And, we prepared for it. He was the first Elastio intern. He actually worked for me at a company I was at. So, that's kind of like the community, the empathy. Like, I want to expose these kids to all these things. I want them to understand what's out there. And so does Ceci. So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the hope for these students every time they go on one of these trips.
Wow. Is there anything about the history of your organization that you want to touch on that we haven't covered? Because I know you talked a lot about it
No, I
already.
think the Eva Core inspiration piece is the huge piece of it. She
Yep.
was the driver to get us going, and I love her so dearly for that, and miss her all the time. And we are planning in 2026, which will be the 10-year anniversary of our first ever Elastio international excursion.
Mm.
We're going to take. I don't know how many students. Let's see how much
Yeah.
money we
Yeah.
can raise, in the next
Oh
3
yeah.
years. But we want to take at least 10 kids and definitely take the 4 alumni. It will be like 25-year-old, 24-year-old young adults. Hopefully they could pay their own way. We want to take them over to Poland, and we want to do a week-long trip over there. And we want to bring Alex Core, Eva's son,
Yeah.
and Eva's best friend, who used to run the trips for her, and kind of run that trip like we used to do with Eva. And we recorded her voice, Eva, back in the day with GPS, so we'd still be able to go to Auschwitz, have the kids with the headsets and
Wow.
kind of experience that. So, yeah, that's the history piece. And as far as where we're going, I know we were going to get into that, but present state. I always tell people, we're still in the nonprofit garage. We're still stuck in the garage. It's a nice garage, but it's a garage that is incredibly difficult to pull the car out of. And what that means is we've been around officially for almost 5 years as a 501c3, almost 8 years really as an organization. And we are now at a point where we're generating somewhere between $80,000 to $100,000 of revenue a year.
Mhm.
But that that isn't coming in one lump sum. And
Right.
so we are living excursion to excursion, I tell our board and my wife. We're living excursion to excursion, like paycheck to paycheck. And so we're doing this trip next week, but I need to turn around when I get home and figure out how can I lay out the dough for the tickets to DC for the end of July, early August for the next trip. So it's always that. So I think, our present state is survive in advance, like the NCAA tournament, and keep impacting kids. And, we unfortunately this year, because funding's been challenging, we have 11 students versus the 20 we took on this trip last year. So the impact is not as volume heavy, but I think it will be in terms of the impact of intensity will be heavier. So that's the current state, and really trying to do the 2 national trips, the one in Atlanta, Selma, Montgomery, Birmingham, which we call the Freedom Trail, the one in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, we call the DMV National Excursion that we do in the summer. And then the local excursion we now do we have 36 LA kids in December on a local 14-hour day in the city. Like to do 2 of those in LA. And then this year, we're going to be partnering with this local Chicago hip hop artist, Fillmore Green. So we're going to be in your neck of the woods in the end of September to finally roll out this local excursion model to another U.S. city. So we're going to be working with youth on the west side of Chicago, where Fillmore is from, and taking them all around the city for a day. So that's kind of like the present for this year. Future state, I'm looking to just pull out of that garage a little bit. And, when you look at people like Mackenzie Scott, who's doing wonderful things for our industry and our nonprofits, it's also an exclusive club. And I don't think people realize that too often when they're trying to start one of these companies. We don't have a seed VC ecosystem in there. Okay. Right. They're not going to come and be like, Aaron Friedman, you and your wife, Ceci, are doing amazing things. We want to invest. How about $3 million of seed funding? And that's not going to happen. And, if you're not making $1 million or more a year and have an operating budget of that much, unfortunately, Mackenzie Scott's not going to be able to consider you. Okay. And that's a lot of grant makers out there and foundations out there. So I think the future for me is being realistic and working on finding some major corporate donors and building up our recurring giving program that I think is a tremendous program. We just haven't had a lot of exposure to. It's called the Catalyst Collective. And with a combination of that, I'm hoping in 2 to 3 years at most, we can stop living excursion to excursion. We can get to about $250,000 of yearly revenue, which would allow us to do 6 local excursions, 2 in LA, 1 in Chicago, 1 in Madison, Wisconsin, 1 in Miami, Florida, and 1 in Houston, Texas. And then 4 national excursions, not introducing any new ones, but me staying back to back in DC, probably mixing LA kids and other local excursion city kids to come on 2 separate weeks, but probably back to back. So we maximize that. So 40 students instead of 20. And then the same with the Freedom Trail. Probably work it around other school districts, spring break, like we do with LAUSD, and do 2 of those. That's almost 250 students a year for $250,000. That doesn't get us a full-time employee yet, and we've never had that. But I know Ceci and I and our board and our volunteers can pull that off if we needed to. We just need the funding. So the future is there. And, obviously I talked about the 2026 excursion back to Poland and reintroducing international. So the blueprint's there. We just need the support, honestly, financially. And also some of these grants we apply for, it'd be cool to have some of the operating consultancy support, because as you know, in this industry, there are a lot of great consultants, but they cost money. And again, if I'm in the garage, I don't have the money to pay you to get out of it. I need you to come in and get me out of it and give me a tow. And then if you give me a tow, I promise you I will pay you back one day when we have that financial means to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Well, we covered a lot. I think
for sure.
Your plan for the future is definitely very specific, and you have exact goals that you're trying to accomplish, which is awesome to hear that. I feel like you're putting yourself in a much easier spot to go down the fundraising path, having this like full out plan and know exactly how many excursions, exactly how many students over the next 2-3 years that you're needing. So that's huge.
And that's big advice we got. I mean, when you look, and also I'm a big advice guy. I like to seek advice, but you don't need to always seek it. You can just go and see what's out there, right?
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
you look at the successful nonprofits, and obviously they have advantages. I have a friend who's one of our Catalyst Collective members. His name is Jake Wood. Jake's a legend. He started Team Rubicon, right? He started Groundswell. And he's amazing, but he's also Jake Wood. He's a two-time tour Marine sniper, college football player, looks like a Hollywood movie star, won an SB twice. You know what I mean? This guy's incredible. So I think, for us, we always knew, looking at what they did, it showed with Team Rubicon. Like, $50 a month will provide this much to this place to do this. And so we always had that mentality, because you have to. And, working in the VC world and seeing these companies pitch their for-profits, they all have pitch decks, right? And, we are living in America here. So the nonprofit industrial complexes, I like to call it, and so do some other folks, you need to be able to play that game the right way. And you have to tell people what they're going to be getting for their money. You can't give them returns in terms of dollars and financial means, but you can try to show them the impact of their generosity, right? And that's the hard balance. I'm a terrible fundraiser, to be honest with you, Joseph. So I'm hoping that we can find some real, like, my dream is having cornerstone people, so I don't have to keep like going after my whole community and like these big networks, and I just have to nurture it's like I'm a recruiter. That's what I do professionally. And this old dude in Orange County, Lou Adler, gave me the best piece of advice ever for recruiting in-house. He said, my boy, the greatest recruiting strategy you could ever have in the world is the best retention strategy. And I think that's the same way with donors.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Let's get the good ones that are going to hold us down, and let's nurture them and love them and hold on to them forever. And, I was just talking to Ceci, my wife, this morning. We have, I think, 45 active Catalyst Collective members, but we've only had 49 in total. So only 4 have dropped out, and the program's been in existence, 2.5 years. So I think the proof is in the pudding, right? Like, if you nurture your people, you treat them differently, if they can see the impact. Every month we change our update email to them when they give a donation to tell them what their impact meant this month, that type of thing. So yeah, I agree with you. I hope we hit at some point. You just got to keep pushing. And my biggest hope is that I don't have to rely on any corporations or anybody else. One of our kids are going to come back and they're going to do it for us. And trust me, I remind them of that. They have an obligation to pay it forward.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel like a key part of your fundraising is the stories that you shared with me already on this, right? Like the stories of the impact that it's had. So yeah, like I think you mentioned that some of the first trips that you did, those then kids are now just getting out of college, right? So it's still they're pretty early on, and they were babies, Joseph.
I was sitting outside of my guy Brian's door in Poland in the hotel he was sharing with like this older chaperone, because I just was like, he can't get out, because then I got to go back, tell his mom and dad that I lost him in Poland. You know what I mean? Like I was just so yes. These trips are stressful in that regard, but it's cool to see these kids grow up. And Brian, that same student, he's now 22. He's a senior at UCLA. And when we took those 36 kids on the local excursion in December, he gave us a private tour of the campus, of the UCLA campus. So it's really cool. Instead of going there with like me trying to finagle it or having like a random student, we got our guy from Watts, from College Track Watts, really a legendary young person in this community already, and a big part of Olastio's history. So it's cool to see. And we'll have more of that. My guy, Joe Kim, he just got into Morehouse, and we're going to Atlanta, and he'll be there as an alumni participant as a senior in high school. So next year when we go to Freedom Trail, Joe Kim's going to be giving us a tour around Atlanta. So I think we can, find the flywheel effect over time. Yeah. We just got to survive long enough. That's why that survive and advance is so key. Yeah.
Well, for people that are listening, what type of engagement are you looking for? Obviously, fundraising is very key to your ongoing operations. Right. That we're gonna keep driving that home. What else do you usually look for? Like some sort of partnerships or connections? Because I'm sure going to cities, that's also a key part of building that experience for the kids.
Yeah, that's a great way to wrap up. I mean, honestly, Obviously, the financial thing's the biggest, as you mentioned. Yep. So I'm really focused on Catalyst Collective. I feel like we haven't been pushing that as much as we should be. And so I really want to get individual donors in that. I'm not so interested anymore of, like the $50 one time. It's nice, but it's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to build community. So that's that. I think if you're working for a company that has like a company match or a philanthropy division, right? And there seems to be a symbiotic thing. Like, obviously, we're going after Marriott and Delta because we both use their services a lot. But if you work for one of those companies, or any type of travel-related company, right, cultural institution, let us know. We'd love to partner with you because we've been paying full price, basically, like group tour. We don't really do any partnerships, right, like in that regard. There's a few that are amazing people that we've been building over time now, but not as many. And I think the last thing is, outside of like the financial and corporate partnership, is what I was saying earlier with the consultant world out there. There's so many wonderful consultants, and there are like influencers in our industry, right? Marketing nonprofit influencers, website builders that are in the nonprofit space, right? Strategists of all kind, operating strategists, right? They create like, strategic plans for you and things like that. I love talking to these people. But then they send me a proposal after talking to me, and I'm a pretty transparent guy. And I'm like, hey, I got like $24,422 in the Olastio bank account. We're about to go on a trip. What can you do for me? And they'll send me a proposal, and it'll be like, I could do a $10,000 thing. It's like $10,000. I can't spend half my bank account on an ROI I don't know is going to pay off. So I think any consultants out there or people that are talented at planning galas, because we've never done something like that, helping us with student engagement, capturing these stories you talked about, right? Creating a true fundraising plan, so it's not just coming out of my head or on like a weird Google Doc, right? If you can do that and you're willing to lend your services for free, pro bono, or for a really nominal price, to see the future potential of like, we're trying to win and we're trying to make dough for our students. And if we make money for our students and we can expand our programming, we will have the ability to pay a consultant and definitely see the ROI at that point. It's just at this time, being in the garage, come on, right? We can't do it. So I think that would be wonderful. I would love for anybody to reach out to us. Our website is just olasteo.org. Olastio.org. There's like a landing page for the Catalyst Collective, and all our socials are that as well. So
Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn,
and LinkedIn. We're trying, with the professional community out there.
Oh yeah, awesome. Well, this is amazing. I have first-handedly experienced what it's like traveling abroad, and knowing how it's impacted me as a person on just at the very least expanding your mind, right? And so I'm all for this, like organizations that allow.
I'm getting you and your wife. I'm getting you and your wife out to the local excursion. You better mark that down, September 30th, right?
Yeah,
you don't have to come. You don't have to come on all the trips, but this itinerary might blow you away. You might get tired just looking at it. All right.
I'm gonna follow up with you.
Hungry.
Yeah. I'm gonna follow up with you.
Do it. I'll send you after this. I'll send you the. We haven't solidified it yet, but I'm giving Fillmore some options, so I'll send it to you what we're thinking right now.
Awesome. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate the work that you're doing, and we're honored to share your story. And we'll hopefully drive a little bit of engagement here. And I'll make a blast definitely to my professional network too on the Marriott in the Delta side, because I feel like there's
please.
That's like low hanging fruit, right? Especially with all the stories you guys have.
It should be. We've hit up the points guy like 6 times, but nobody hits us back. So yeah.
Got it. Awesome. Aaron, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be talking soon here.
Thanks, Joseph. Appreciate you.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. If you know of a great organization or individual leaving a positive impact, we'd love to tell their story. Check us out and contact us at gtzp.org. Don't forget, for more stories like this, you could also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Instagram followers are link trees in the bio. And for podcast listeners, we're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thanks for listening, and see you again soon.